What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me today, as always, Chris Fedor. But we also have Jimmy Watkins back on the podcast, and we are going to be previewing the Oklahoma City Thunder versus Cleveland Cavaliers game on Wednesday night. So, there's a lot to go into this game about. These are the two best teams in each conference, and as Chris wrote in an article today, it's the first meeting between a team on a 15-game win streak and another on a 10-game win streak. It's also the first ever interconference game between teams with a win percentage of 85% or higher this late into the season. So, as Chris wrote, get your popcorn ready, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to have a little bit of fun. And I wanted to start off with this question for you guys. There are so many storylines for this game, as I mentioned, but what do you think is the most intriguing heading into Wednesday's matchup and what many are calling the Battle of the Titans?
To me, the most intriguing thing is how the Cavs' number one ranked offense looks against Oklahoma City's defense. Because there has been no team in the NBA that has been able to find a solution to slow down the Cavs offense. But they haven't played a defense like this in OKC. So I'm just curious to see how free-flowing the Cavs offense is, how Darius Garland handles the physicality, how Evan Mobley deals with a level of physicality that he's going to deal with, all those different things. Like, these are the kinds of teams, theoretically, that can take the Cavs offense out of its rhythm. They can be physical, they can be grabby, they can push guys around. That was always the old formula for trying to slow down the dynastic Golden State Warriors. Get physical, get grabby, try and get their star players in foul trouble and stuff like that. Rough them up as much as you possibly can. So I'm just curious to see, I don't really have doubts about it necessarily, but I'm just curious to see what level this offense for the Cavs can get to against this caliber of defense.
Yeah, I would say also the level of switching that Oklahoma City deploys is kind of the perfect stylistic clash with all the movement stuff that Kenny has put in, right? Like, the idea of switching can be that it takes an offense out of its rhythm. It makes you attack one-on-one. You can find, there's not a ton of weak defenders on Oklahoma City, but the idea for the Cavs would be to find the balance between, okay, if you guys are going to switch, we're going to find some more advantageous matchups for us, but also we're going to do that without losing all the rhythm in our offense. And I think that's in a really important big picture concept for the Cavs too. Boston's a really switchy team in the playoffs in general. You're going to get the highest level. You're going to get teams with a lot of capable defenders that are going to do something pretty similar, especially given the success that the Cavs have had with all of the movement-based stuff that Kenny has put in. So definitely agree with Chris on that. I also just want to say, as an aside, the Oklahoma City Thunder are not on a 15-game winning streak. They just
on a 15-game regular season winning streak.
That's fine, but I just don't like that we're ignoring that the in-season tournament championship game happened. I think it's dumb that the NBA created this tournament out of thin air and doesn't count its most important game in any way, shape, or form. Like, you can't find it. You can't find this game on Basketball Reference. That is very silly to me.
It can't count. There's no way that it can count.
That's right.
Because they were the only two teams that played it. Are they going to play 83 games and the other team's going to play 82?
It can't count?
No.
Okay. All right.
Not for the regular season.
I got nothing for that one. They lost a game. I don't know what to tell you. The Oklahoma City Thunder lost a game. I saw it. We all saw it. It was on a big stage in Vegas. Moving on. I also think this is interesting because from an Oklahoma City perspective, they're as much as the Cavs have not seen a defense like this, I would be interested to see, like, can the Thunder score Can the Thunder get in a flame throwing match with the Cavs? The way the Cavs jack up threes, the best offense in the league. Last year in the playoffs, Oklahoma City, and I'm not trying. This is the regular season. It's not the playoffs. I'm not trying to equate the two, but these are the storylines that you're watching in the big picture. Last year in the playoffs, Oklahoma City ran up against a Thunder team that put its offense in mud, and it looked like Shai was the only guy. Shai was the only guy who could solve the puzzle. And I think the Cavs defense can put Oklahoma City in similar situations. Like I'm watching how Jalen Williams looks in this environment. Is he a legit number 2 for Oklahoma City? And then as an aside, the return of Isaiah Hartenstein, who has given the Cavs all kinds of problems as a Knick. That's bringing back all kinds of bad cobwebs from the first playoff failure a couple of years ago, both for Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. So every time you see him or Mitchell Robinson or the Knicks, I'm going to be watching to see how those bigs respond.
Before we get into, because we will, the big defensive piece of that, because I think that's a good point that you make, Jimmy, and something that we should delve into more, and I have it on our itinerary for today's podcast. But the other portion of this that I think is really interesting, and we talked about it a lot in today's press conference, was just the small market kind of teams that are getting the limelight in tomorrow's game, especially when you talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers. A lot of people had the idea of where OKC could be when they made the trades for Alex Caruso, Isaiah Hartenstein, all those different things that they were able to do in the offseason that ultimately gave people the idea that they were going to be at the top of the Western Conference. But the Cleveland Cavaliers, a lot of different people didn't expect this. 31-4 is hard to kind of prepare for, but this is a team that has not gotten a lot of national notoriety, and there's still skepticism, especially when you go back to what Jimmy was talking about with people still referring to 2 years ago against the first round exit to the New York Knicks, also mentioning last year's Eastern Conference semifinals exit to the Boston Celtics, who ended up winning the championship. When you talk about getting into the minutia of the NBA, the ratings of the NBA, and Kenny Atkinson said it today, kind of, it doesn't matter that we're small market. We're the 2 best teams in the NBA. What do you think about that dynamic in today's league, especially, but also how it could help the Cleveland Cavaliers, especially around All-Star voting time?
I guess I just kind of wonder, what kind of notoriety do the Cavs want that they don't think they're getting? You know, they're number 1 in every single power rankings.
No, they're not. They're not. They're not. The NBA.com has them second to the OKC Thunder this week.
Okay, let me rephrase. They're either number 1 or number 2 in every single power rankings. I mean, Oklahoma City has a higher point differential than the Cavs. They've got a higher net rating than the Cavs. Like, that's justifiable. It's not like anyone's putting the Knicks over the Cavs right now, or the Boston Celtics over the Cavs, or the Denver Nuggets or something like that. So I just kind of wonder in my own head, like, what is it that they want that they're not getting? The only thing that comes to mind to me is just like national television appearances. But that's something that is built before the season even starts. And I think Kenny Atkinson mentioned it earlier today. This wasn't expected, not to this level for the Cavs, right? Everybody knew coming into the season that they had a chance to be a good team, probably a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference, coming off back-to-back playoff appearances, 99 wins in the previous 2 years, getting to the Eastern Conference semifinals and losing to the eventual champion Boston Celtics. But like this is a level that people didn't expect the Cavs to get to. So it's kind of understandable to me that early on in the season, schedule makers would have chosen other people to put on the national stage, right? Kind of hedging their bets with the Cavs. But when they got an opportunity to flex other teams out and flex them in, these 2 matchups against Oklahoma City, they did it. And I give the network execs a lot of credit for just overlooking market, overlooking all these other ancillary factors and saying, look, the Cavs are really damn good and Oklahoma City is really damn good, and market be damned. We're just going to put what we think are the 2 premier teams in the NBA, on the national stage and allow all of these casual NBA fans to get a look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and get a look at the Cavs with Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen. Jared Allen was on ESPN earlier today talking about the matchup. And if you look on social media, the NBA is pumping this one up as much as possible. And that's a good thing for the game. And I think it's good to see, fresh blood in this kind of environment with these kinds of stakes and all these different storylines around it. But I do think since the Cavs have gone on this winning streak and the Cavs have reached this particular level, I do think they're getting a level of notoriety that is warranted for a team that has done this to this point.
I do think it's funny. There's a level of doth protest too much when guys tell you, to a man, every person in pretty much every professional locker room will tell you, oh, we don't care about the outside noise. We block all that stuff out. And yet now you're turning around and complaining when you're not getting enough national media attention. How would you know? How would you know? You don't read anything. You don't watch any television. You don't listen to any podcasts. You don't read anybody's tweets. So that's kind of interesting. That's kind of interesting that apparently, that you're not getting enough national media attention. I would say to a bigger, I might write this off the game tomorrow. I do think there is something at afoot here, though, about a much bigger NBA wide trend that's happening, which is that the most marketable superstars in the league are aging out. Your LeBrons, your Stephs, your Kevin Durant's, really the Stephs and LeBrons. Those two have been the torchbearer and the ratings grabbers for a decade now. LeBron even longer, but the LeBron Steph thing has done a lot of legwork. Even this year on Christmas, they put on another great show. It was the highest rated Christmas game in, I don't know, however long, but it was great. And it's fun to see them. The league is struggling to create new stars, right? Your Jason Tatums, Anthony Edwards, these guys are not moving the needle the same way that LeBron and Steph have yet. And I do think this is something of a vicious cycle, because the NBA just keeps, back in 1980, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird happened to land with the Lakers and the Celtics. And the lesson that the NBA took was, well, boy, people really like the Lakers and Celtics. Well, actually, I think they might have liked Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. I'm just checking. Do they like the Chicago Bulls? Or did they like Michael Jordan? Is Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic driving ratings? No. Chicago Bulls don't drive ratings. Michael Jordan drove ratings. Kobe and Shaq drove ratings. The Lakers didn't drive ratings. LeBron drove ratings with the Cavs. So I think there is something bigger here, where I think if you put Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in front of people more, people will say, hey, this guy's pretty freaking fun to watch. That's a crafty guard and a wings body. He's got a great pull-up jumper. I can get down with that. And that they do need to spend more time and put more effort into marketing younger stars. At the same time, in this particular case, you got the spotlight you're asking for. I agree with you, Chris.
Just to go back to Chris's point about not knowing what they want more of, I think it's less so wanting more of something and wanting less skepticism of something that happened 2 years ago or a year ago, right? Because Charles Barkley took to NBA on TNT just last week as the Philadelphia 76ers got blown out by the Golden State Warriors by 34 points. And before the game, or I think after the game, actually, he was like, I'd still take the 76ers when healthy over the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I was sitting there dumbfounded. And it's like a conversation that we have to have about, obviously, it's Charles Barkley. He has some of the most outrageous takes on the internet in all of NBA history. But I think there's a reality of there are people that are still questioning because of what the Cavs weren't able to do in year one of Donovan Mitchell being here, or year two, and not really looking at the bigger picture because they're not around the team as much as we are. But all that to say,
you think that's fair for them to question them at this point?
Yeah, once
Yes,
again,
because it's not the playoffs.
Donovan's sitting there at practice today.
Donovan's saying it.
He's saying you can't have it both ways. Donovan's sitting there at practice today and saying we've only won one more game than we won the day before. You get your street credibility. You get it in the playoffs. We've only won one more game in last year in the playoffs than we or whatever than they did the year before, which is not technically true. They actually won a playoff series. They actually won 4 more games. Whatever. They went one more round. Like he's saying Donovan Mitchell was repeating the same talking points that people use against the Cavs. They're not playoff proven, which is a fact. And then the Cavs are turning, sometimes Donovan are sometimes turning around and then saying, why don't people, look at all this 10 minutes earlier, Donovan's like, look at all these cameras here. You guys weren't here in Charlotte. It's like, which is it? Which is it?
Yeah, it's funny because I think they're sometimes conflicted within themselves because they want the attention, they want the notoriety, they want to be shown the kind of love that these other big market teams are getting. But they also understand that the reality, and they've all mentioned it throughout the season, it comes April, May, and June when things, and as Chris has said a lot on this podcast, and I really like how he words it, reputations can only change when significant change is made. So we'll have to see that.
I mean, the other thing is, and I was talking to somebody about this earlier today, the truth is a lot of the comparisons that are going to come with the Cavs are going to go back to the Warriors, the dynastic Golden State Warriors, especially when you have a team that is on a regular season 73 win pace. They don't even want to broach that conversation. I've tried to bring that conversation to multiple players, and they just don't want anything to do with it. And I totally understand why. But if that's the comparison that you're making, there is one big difference with that. And it's those Warriors, it didn't feel like a fluke, and they were given the benefit of the doubt. I don't think the Cavs are a fluke. I don't think this is some kind of mirage. I think they are really, really, really good. And I think they are one of a few teams that can actually win the NBA championship. But they're not getting the benefit of the doubt like the 73-win Warriors, because the 73-win Warriors were coming off an NBA championship. And people had seen them do it on the biggest stage. They had seen them do it against a high-level team in the Cavs of the Big Three era. And yes, Kyrie was hurt and all those different factors. But they won the championship the year before. So they just kind of built on and enhanced the reputation that they already had. So nobody was going to sit there and say, fluke, 73 wins, doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Because they had already won the championship. With the Cavs, it's in the back of people's minds, it still exists. Maybe they're closer to the Atlanta Hawks. Maybe they're closer to the Toronto Raptors, because those teams hadn't had the playoff level success of the Golden State Warriors. And they were just great regular season teams that won 50 to 60 games and had multiple all-stars and did it the team kind of way and were number one in offense and hit a bunch of threes and however you wanted to phrase it. So it's a fight that the Cavs are going to continue to have, and all the players understand it. Donovan is the one who's saying it. He's shouting it from the rooftops. We haven't done anything yet. And if you have your team leader saying those kinds of things, other people are going to look at this team and say, cool, but you haven't done anything yet. We agree with you. You haven't done anything yet, because ultimate success is defined by what happens in the playoffs. And when you're a team like the Cavs that has to this point gone 31-4, that is, if not the best team in the NBA, the second best team in the NBA, depending on where you come out on that conversation, and you're setting all of these different records for greatness, and you're doing things that only some of the best teams in NBA history have done, it makes it harder and harder to doubt that it's real. But for this team, success is only going to be defined by spring. That's how they want it, and that's what it's going to be.
And to Jimmy's point earlier, the NBA is trying to create these stars. It's trying to create these narratives. It's trying to create these storylines that will help itself, right? And they're making a huge deal out of this one because maybe they have to for ratings and engagement, and the records kind of do it themselves for them. Also, just to add in for all my the fanatics of who's calling games, Mike Breen enthusiasts, like this is the first Cavs regular season game on ESPN he's called since LeBron's return in November 2018. He's called 3 of their playoff games in 2023 and 2024, and the play-in game against the Hawks in 2022. But like this is significant, and yet the Cavs continue to say that they're just looking at it as another regular season game. Jimmy, do you buy that?
No. I also would like to say that no, it's not another regular season game. They don't look at it that way. I don't believe it. I don't know what else you want me to say about that. I want to say about what Chris was talking about with the Golden State comparison. Because Kenny came from there, it's unescapable, right? The kind of offense they're running. Yep. The parallels between JB Bickerstaff as the Mark Jackson of this group, who built the defensive foundation and got you to a certain point in the playoffs, but you felt like there was more meat on the bone. Like there's so many comparisons, but I would say even take a step further. Were the 73-win Warriors met with heavy pushback? No. The 67-win Warriors from the year before they won a championship, absolutely met with pushback. Oh, you can't win with a jump shooting team. I was around when the Warriors fell behind 2-1 to the Memphis Grizzlies in the Western Conference playoffs. The grit and grind Grizzlies against the jump shooting Warriors. They're not tough enough. The Grizzlies are, too much physicality. And then Steve Kerr put Andrew Bogut on Tony Allen, and they frickin' started a dynasty. So, this is kind of the way things work. This is like the Cavs are going through a very natural climb through the pecking order in the NBA. They lost ugly. I mean, you don't like it to start as low as they did. You lost ugly in the first round 2 years ago. Those doubts, I'm sure that people are still, some of the people who are doubting the Cavs are still thinking about the Knicks series more than they are about last year's Celtics series. Like that really stuck out as we were all there for the Orlando series, and that was a huge step for this organization. But let's be honest, not the most memorable first round playoff series. It was a rock fight for 7 games. The Knicks series stands out more in people's minds. So I think that should be a point raised to it as well. As far as the Hawks comparison, I'm in a weird place with the Warriors Hawks thing because the Cavs clearly did the Mike Budenholzer Hawks, which Kenny was an assistant on that team too, I believe as well. Did they have a Darius Garland even? I don't know. Who's their best player? Jeff Teague, Al Horford, Paul Millsap? I don't know.
It was a collection of all-stars without that high
weird
level.
Yeah, they had 5 all-stars. They had 5 all-stars, which, by the way, if you want to make a case for the Cavs to have a bunch of all-stars, there's part of it. But I would also, in saying that, the Hawks certainly don't have a Donovan Mitchell. Didn't have a Donovan Mitchell, I should say. And they certainly didn't have an Evan Mobley. The Cavs don't have a Steph Curry. There's no prime Steph Curry. As good as Donovan is, Steph Curry was man, I could tear up talking about Steph's 2014. Before KD got there, he was so fun. He was so fun to watch on those Warriors teams. And I love Donovan. He's just not that guy yet. He's not a top 5 player in the world. People were saying Steph Curry was better than LeBron James in his prime. That's a real conversation that we were having. He won back-to-back MVPs, the second one unanimous in the prime of LeBron James's career, man. So it is kind of funny that we're having, I think the Cavs stylistically do fit a lot of the Warriors style jumps, but they don't quite have the head of the snake. But they, at the same time, they have more impressive heads of the snake than the Hawks. We're in a weird middle ground here.
Chris, you care to weigh in on whether or not the Cavs think this is just another regular season game?
No, they absolutely don't. But I think they're very, very careful about how bombastic they come across, especially when you are the best team in the Eastern Conference. At some point, when you are doing the things that the Cavs are doing, as much as they haven't been there and they haven't had the playoff success, you have to act like the best team in the Eastern Conference. You have to act like the best team in the NBA. You can't act surprised by your own success. You know what I'm saying? And we talked about this a few different times on the podcast, like this idea of measuring stick games for the Cavs, this idea of them having to test themselves. We have reached a point where they don't have to talk like that anymore. They don't have to have that level of humility. Sure, have appropriate fear, understand what the regular season is versus the postseason. But at some point, like, it's okay. It's okay to smell your own stuff, right? It's okay to talk and act like the best team in the NBA and carry yourself that kind of way. Because I think carrying yourself that kind of way and acting that kind of way, I think that infiltrates your own locker room, and it allows you to play with a level of confidence. It allows you to play with a level of freedom. It allows you to get yourself to a different level. Like, if you sit there and believe that you shouldn't be at a certain level, or you sit there and you believe that like a matchup against Oklahoma City isn't meaningful, like, that's too much, right? But if you sit there and you believe that like you need all these different tests and all these different measuring stick games against teams that are behind you in the standings, against teams that haven't accomplished what you have to this point, that's too much the other way too. So I do think that there's a maturity that this team has and an understanding that this team has. But there's nobody that can sit there and say, when you're talking about number one in the East against number one in the West, that it isn't more significant than playing against the Hornets over the weekend. Like, these guys are human. They're competitors. They understand that there are levels to this sort of thing. And when they play against Oklahoma City and they play against Boston and they play against New York and they play against Milwaukee, that's just different. And they don't treat it like a regular season game.
And I want to bring it back to the game itself, right? Because obviously we've talked a lot about the game around it and how like it's going to impact the season and all those different things in the NBA. But Donovan Mitchell mentioned in his availability today that the Thunder run their offense through Shai, going back to kind of what Jimmy was talking about earlier into the podcast. And they do it intentionally because they understand what he's able to do. He is an MVP candidate. He is their leading scorer, all those different things. While the Cavs have so many different options that they've empowered throughout the season. Not to say that OKC isn't doing that, but what do you think is the most difficult task for the Cavs in stopping the Thunder, knowing that Shai will have the ball in his hands and understanding that they might need to go to Donovan at different points to lead the way as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a danger in that, honestly. I do. Like, I think one of the worst things that can happen for a team is you get caught up in a situation where you're playing against an opponent the caliber of Oklahoma City, and you feel like you have to do something different than what you've done throughout the course of the season. Do something different than what has gotten you to the level of success. And I think Donovan has said it repeatedly, and other players have said it repeatedly. Can we be this team through adversity as well as prosperity? Can we continue to do the same things and have the same trust and have the same confidence and have the same belief in our stuff? And when you get into a matchup against Oklahoma City, like, yeah, there is a temptation to say, Donovan, do a little bit more. And if the matchup is favorable for Donovan and the opportunity calls for it, then cool. Like, be the Donovan Mitchell that you have been throughout the course of your career and see if there are moments throughout where you can take over. But he also has to stay within the system. He also has to stay within the structure of the way that this team is built. And I think it's going to be really, really important for a team like the Cavs, who they haven't played in a bunch of these kinds of games, not together as a cohesive unit, that when they do get into this kind of game, continuing to trust everything that they have done and continue to believe that their way is the right way. Even if Oklahoma City is going to go about it a different kind of way, because they're different, because they have different personnel. Don't get caught up in what they're doing. Just continue to do the things that you do, trust in the things that you do, and believe that your way is better than their way.
Yeah, to my early point, the Thunder have to play through Shai, basically. I mean, it's him and J-Dub are the only two reliable creators for others out there. I just looked it up real quick. Shai has a 33% usage rate. Jalen Williams has a 27% usage rate. And then Chet Holmgren's got a 25% usage rate, but he's hurt. Everyone else on their roster is under 20. The Cavs have 4 dudes: Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, and September MVP Ty Jerome, over 20% usage rate, which just to highlight that the Cavs have more offensive outlets through which they can play. The buck starts and stops with Shai for the Thunder, and when Shai's on the bench, it starts and stops with J-Dub, or they run some stuff through Isaiah Hartenstein too. But like, the Cavs have been in that place. That's kind of where they were before, right? Just play through the guards, play through the primary ball handlers, let them, set a screen for them, let them create. That's why they went and got Kenny, because they wanted to diversify the offense. And look at the results. Look at what we're seeing here. That's why we're having this conversation. That's why ESPN changed its freaking TV schedule, because the Cavs and the Thunder are so good. But that's why the Cavs are surprised, because their offense has been completely revolutionized.
When we were talking to Evan today, I mentioned it to him, and he kind of looked surprised. He was like, yeah, it's funny to be known for your offense when our defense has been our identity for the last 3 years. And it's definitely something that they'll have to lean on. And getting into my next question for you guys, does it just prove how good Shai is that all the teams in the NBA have the same information, have the same analytics, understand how the Thunder play, and that they're going to run the offense through him, and yet knowing he's going to have the ball in his hands, they're still not able to stop him? And do you think that helps the Cavs coming into Wednesday's contest, knowing what they can focus in on to try and take away Shai, as they have of other teams that have star players, maybe just not to this caliber?
We're in an era where great offense is going to be great defense every single time. The benefit that the Cavs do have is that, they've got some like-sized players, multiple like-sized players, that they can throw at Shai throughout the course of the game, try and keep him off balance, try and keep him out of rhythm, try and give him different looks and stuff like that. All the coaches will say it, all the players will say it. You can't give great players the same look every single time. You can't give them the same scheme to go up against. You can't give them the same defender to go up against. So for the Cavs, it's going to be a little bit of Karras, and it's going to be a little bit of Donovan, and it's going to be a little bit of Dean Wade, and it's going to be a little bit of maybe Darius Garland, and it's going to be a little bit of Isaac Okoro if he plays, and all those different guys that the Cavs have, put on different players this caliber throughout the course of this season. That's a benefit that they have. And no, they don't have, aside from Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade, they don't have somebody where you say, all right, I feel really, really good about the Cavs' chances against that caliber player, right? It's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's in the MVP conversation for a reason. But the number of sheer bodies that they have to throw against him has a tendency, or has the ability, to wear him down and maybe frustrate him and cause him problems that not every team in the NBA is equipped with causing him. In saying all of that, I don't think anybody in the NBA would say that Oklahoma City's easy to guard. They're a defensive-minded team, and they're the number one defense in the NBA. And just because one player has a high usage rate, it doesn't mean that the offense is easy to guard. I think, there's enough diversity within the Thunder and the other actions that they can run off of it. they can use Isaiah Hartenstein at the elbow extended and have him be a little bit of a point forward type playmaker. Jalen Williams is in the conversation for most improved player. He's in the conversation as a first-time All-Star. So, yes, so much of it is Shai, and so many people know that he's going to be the primary guy for them, and the offense, for the most part, is going to run through him. But when the offense runs through that level of player, it still makes it really, really difficult to deal with.
Two things on that. One, the Thunder also space really well around Shai. They play really small. They surround him with shooters, and that makes it really hard to help on Shai. It makes you make decisions. Cason Wallace isn't having the shooting season that he had last year, but you're talking about the way that Dort has transformed his shot. Aaron Wiggins is a key role player for them. Chat again when he's healthy. Jalen Williams, you have to guard him. Caruso has been in the past. He's not shooting it well this year. So that's another thing we should mention. And then to Chris's point about the kind of season we're talking about, I just typed into StatHead players with a usage percentage at least 33%, which is you have the ball a lot. That's not quite like your MVP Russell Westbrook year, but I think it's fair to say 33%. We're talking heliocentric offense here. And also an effective field goal percentage above 57. There's a few guys who just didn't touch. I don't know how these guys, even your Boban is on here. We're not talking about that. But for guys who actually played high minutes, Giannis, Joel Embiid, Luka, Steph Curry, and Shai. That's the list. 57% effective field goal percentage, usage percentage above 33. You just don't see a dude who's asked to do as much as Shai is asked to do it as efficiently as he does it. That's why he's an MVP candidate. That's why the Thunder have been able to transform their trajectory with the trade that they made for him. Honestly, he is incredible to watch. I can't wait for this game.
Just to go off of that, because that's a great stat, Jimmy. And I think when you talk about stat for stat, I think it's interesting to think about the minute allocation that the Cavs have had. Obviously, we understand that there are 3 players playing 30 minutes or more for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they're 31-4. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe as they are tied for the 5th best record in NBA history through 35 games in the season, I believe the 4 teams that are above them all had at least a player playing 35 minutes or more in that time period. So it's definitely interesting to see how the Cavs have been able to use their depth, something that Kenny Atkinson came in to the season saying that he was going to utilize. And just, what's the word, Jimmy? What's the word?
Chemistry? Sorry, I wasn't listening.
No. About the depth,
Celebrate.
Jimmy. Celebrate.
Oh, we're celebrating depth.
Celebrate
Sorry.
the depth.
I was looking at basketball reference again. Sorry, I was working.
I tried to tee up respect the cup for you earlier, and now to celebrate the depth, but it
that
didn't
is another,
go as well as I planned.
That is another 73-1 Warriors parallel, by the way, though. They were all about strength and numbers, and one of the most incredible things about Steph's couple of MVP seasons was how low his minutes were during those seasons. So I think that's another precursor in the Cavs' favor is the 73-win Warriors. They're not just spanking teams. They're doing it and catching their breath in the 4th quarter.
Right. And Chris, you kind of alluded to it earlier, and I wanted to get your official analysis on the situation. Isaac Okoro and Sam Merrill both were full participants in practice today. We even got to see them in a little 3-on-3 workout after practice where they were working out with guys like Jalen Tyson, Craig Porter Jr., JT Thor, Luke Travers, and just getting acclimated and using all the different physical activities that we know had been something that Isaac Okoro at least hadn't been doing coming into the day. So is there any update on them both being questionable, but what is the likelihood of them playing at against OKC on Wednesday?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of waiting to see how they feel when they wake up, but all signs point to them playing, and everything that I've heard is that the expectation is that both of them will be ready to go against OKC. I would anticipate that the Cavs continue to start Dean Wade. They've lost one game with Dean in the starting lineup, and he is really, really important to the success of the team. So even though, Isaac was holding down that starting small forward spot during the stretch that he was out there before this injury happened, my assessment of it, my feel on it, is that Dean's going to continue to be in the starting lineup. But having Isaac back, if he is back, and it does feel like he is going to be back, it's a big deal for a team like the Cavs. I don't think they will let him play, the allotment of minutes that he's grown accustomed to. I think they're going to be cautious. And if there's any pain whatsoever, if Isaac isn't feeling 100%, if there's any nervousness about him taking another hit on the shoulder, they have already told Isaac, yo, sit. If that's the case, sit. And Kenny Atkinson is cautious by nature. And I'm told that he's had conversations with the training staff that have been like, hey, if there's anything off, even the slightest bit, do not clear him, sort of thing. Because I think the Cavs understand that there's obviously a bigger picture in play, and they don't want Isaac to have another setback. But Isaac wants to play, and he's doing everything that he can to play, and he's an important piece of this thing, especially when you're talking about trying to guard Shai and guard Jalen Williams and like-sized players. So I do expect him to be out there, and I expect Sam Merrill to be out there. And I expect it to be the first time where Kenny Atkinson has to deal with his 11-man rotation.
Selfishly, as a hoop lover, just to Chris's point, I don't want to see, in a game like this, I don't want to see dudes. I mean, you're obviously going to be getting your feet wet as you return from injury to some extent. There'll be a little bit of growing pains there, but no tepidness. Let's just let's go. Let's play fast. Let's make quick decisions. Let's hit people.
And I think that Isaac Okoro is the perfect guy for that. If he were to come back, he's coming back and immediately trying to play full speed. Kind of the same way that Max Strus was, seeking out contact in his first game back. Everybody was like, whoa. We know you want to get back out there, but don't re-injure yourself at the same time. And the other interesting thing about this kind of 2-game series with OKC is that they play each other again on January 16th. So that's not far off. It's less than 10 days away. And Chris, obviously, you mentioned it. If there is any sign that Isaac Okoro can't go, the Cavs will hold him out. But when it comes to being able to learn and get feedback from tomorrow's game, that's how excited I am about it. I keep saying today instead of tomorrow. But when it comes to being able to get feedback, and this is a team that continues to learn, especially when they haven't had so many losses this season, which game do you think is more important in your mind? Wednesdays in Cleveland, or when they travel to OKC on Thursday, January 16th, when they get to apply what they learned from the first matchup?
See, it's weird because I'm at a point where I don't consider it all that important for them. But I think where you're going with this, it would be the second one, just to see what adjustments they can make and how quickly they can make those adjustments. And, that's more playoff-y than the first meeting against a team like OKC. This one's the more exciting one, given everything that's surrounding it, the win streak that OKC is on, the win streak that the Cavs, regular season win streak that the Cavs are on, the fact that, this hasn't been done before with this particular matchup, with the team from the Western Conference, a team from the Eastern Conference this late into the season with these winning percentages. But I do think when you're talking about the Cavs and everything for them being about the playoffs and handling prosperity and learning from mistakes and all those different things that come with it, I would say it's probably the second matchup against OKC because they're able to collect some data, something that Kenny Atkinson loves to say. They're able to make adjustments. They're able to make some changes, whether it's with the lineup, whether it's with the approach that they take offensively, defensively. It doesn't mean wholesale changes. It just means minor tweaks around the margins that could make up the difference in this kind of matchup. And I do think like that's more playoffy than playing a team for the first time.
There's also a little bit of a, if I were to play devil's advocate, I know that's not like me, but if I were to make the case, I understand why Kenny's saying that, like, for a coach, you want to get the full data set, then look at the film, then come back and make adjustments. I get that. For me, I'm thinking, like, how do you handle, the Cavs haven't eaten too many punches. I mean, like you said, 10-game winning streak, the Thunder are on a fake 15-game winning streak. Like, what happens? How do you eat a punch? Like, let's see what happens if, let's say, you know, somebody, I'm not going to say a name, but like, what if Oklahoma City's physicality is a shock to the system for somebody? Like, how do you adjust in game? I think, you know, not having the benefit of looking at film can also simulate a playoff like a must-win playoff game environment, right? Where it's like, again, we're talking about a freaking January regular season game. There is no playoff environment happening here, but the Oklahoma City plays physical defense, and I'll be interested to see how the Cavs react to that. How they, if Shai starts cutting up the defense, what will Kenny do in between timeouts? Not you know, with all this time to watch film and cook up and practice. What will you do right now? You know, Shai just went on an 8-0 run by himself. How are you going to do? How are you going to pivot from that? That's another thing to watch for.
I 100% agree. I think that's something that Kenny has been good on this season, is showing how he's made in-game adjustments. We talk about that a lot on this podcast, especially after the JB Bickerstaff era, where we wanted to see more of that, the X's and O's and all the changes in-game rather than taking a game to make those said adjustments. That's definitely something that we've discussed at length, and I think it's important, especially going into this next one. But to wrap up this episode, I think it's important to mention just that as much as there is like everybody watching this one matchup, I think we also have to reflect on where the Cavs are already into the season. The Cavs reached 31 wins last year on February 3rd. The Cavs reached 31 wins this season on January 5th, right? And then also you talk about not just minute allocation, but productivity with the ball in their hands, being able to score at will. Darius and Donovan are matched as the leading scorer this season at 13 games apiece. So that shows that they've been sharing the wealth, being able to get off ball and give up opportunities when necessary to let the other person shine. So I think it's really important when you talk about how these two guards that are going to be attacked on Wednesday and be two people that you want to look forward to watching are definitely showing themselves in a different light than they have in the previous seasons.
I mean, I think the big thing is that to this point of the season, guys, the Cavs have proven everything that they can prove to this point of the season. Everybody understands their ultimate proving ground is springtime. The players get it, the coaches get it, the organization gets it. They have set that level of expectation based on the way that they have played. Not every team's proving ground is the spring, right? The Detroit Pistons' proving ground is not the spring. The Atlanta Hawks' proving ground is not the spring. But for the Cavs, their proving ground is the spring. And that's a good place to be as an organization. In saying all of that, they have shown everybody everything that they could show to this point. The Darius Donovan thing works. It works at the highest level. The Evan Jarrett thing works. It works at the highest level. This offense is real. And it is very, very difficult for any opponent to deal with. It doesn't matter if it's Charlotte. It doesn't matter if it's Washington. It doesn't matter if it's the Golden State Warriors. Good, bad, terrible. Whatever defense you throw against this offense, they are going to have problems with it because of how diverse it is, because of how unpredictable it is, because of the number of weapons that they have offensively, because of the way that the ball moves back and forth. Like, there are people that see the Cavs for the first time and they're like, whoa, does it look like this every single night? So they have proven that. They've proven that they can be a dynamic offensive team despite some roster flaws or some perceived roster flaws. They have shown that even though there has been this step forward offensively, it hasn't had to come at the expense of their defense. Yeah, they've taken a slight step back on the defensive end of the floor, but it's almost negligible. And since the calendar flipped to December, they are an elite defense again. So like all these different things that people wanted to say about the Cavs, they have shown that they are a legitimate title contender, and they have proven that all of these perceived flaws aren't as much of a problem anymore, at least here in the regular season. So I think like that can't be overlooked no matter what happens against Oklahoma City. Like they've beaten great teams already. They don't need to beat Oklahoma City to validate this start. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't need to play the highest level of offensive game to validate that they have the best offense in the NBA and it can work when you get to the playoffs. So to this point, they have shown everything that they could show. And they have proven so many things that were said about this team in the offseason wrong.
That being said, if they lose tomorrow, Stephen A is going to go on First Take the next day and say they're soft and can't win in the playoffs. Be careful what you ask for when you get this national spotlight. It's not all that fun. I just to add what Chris said, Evan Mobley looks like a baby superstar, contrary to premature opinions to the otherwise. And the biggest thing to me is like
very much not Derek Favors.
Right. There's upward mobility here, right? Like Evan Mobley scratching the surface, like doing a lot of scratching the surface. I mean, the surface needs some Band-Aids. The surface is all scratched up. But it's not like there's still more there. Clearly there's more there because we're just now seeing all this stuff that he's doing now. So, I mean, think of even like from October to now, the confidence that you see Evan Mobley shooting threes with, night and day. I am so blown away by how far he has come. And I just really didn't think that Evan Mobley could make this kind of shooting jump. And caveat, we'll see how it looks in the playoffs. But right now, he looks like he's come so much farther than I thought anyone could come in one season. He's done it in half a season, not even. We're not even halfway through yet. So that's crazy. And to the early point, these guys are playing 30 minutes a night. Like, now ratchet up Donovan Mitchell to 35 minutes a night. Ratchet up Darius Garland to 35 minutes a night. And, celebrate your depth, but also remember in the playoffs that the 8 best dudes are going to play most of these minutes. And even, if a team makes a run on your second unit, like Donovan's going to be out there more to stem the tide. So that's what I would say. They're doing all this and there's still upward mobility.
While I do agree with you in that Evan Mobley has made a jump that's been drastic, I don't want to kind of shortchange him. The growth began last year when he came back from his injury, right? Like he had arthroscopic knee surgery. He came back. The Cavs were shooting more threes, albeit under JD Bickerstaff, even though nobody
he wasn't doing this.
Credit.
He wasn't doing this.
No, not clearly. Not even close. I'm saying, but it began then.
We've been poking Evan Mobley to shoot threes since he got here, and yes, every now and again he has had streaks where he took 2 or 3 here, took 2 or 3 there. He is launching them with a consistency and confidence we have never seen from him, or anything close to. He's like. He has taken – I need to reconsider my position on Sizzle Real Season on Instagram right now. He looks like God. Ben Simmons shooting these threes in an empty gym right now, except he's playing NBA games. He's playing NBA games against really good teams, and he's making them.
All I'm going to say is 2 things. One, I didn't say that he was doing this last year. You said it's only been half of a season. I'd say the development began last year. Second of all,
okay, the development began when he
God.
picked up a basketball. What are we talking about?
No, come on. You understand what I'm saying? God dang it. We're talking about his 3-point evolution, all right? We're talking about him coming back and clearly only shooting 3-pointers at practice almost when it came to working with Darius Garland, all those other things when we saw it come back. But the other portion of that is that the sizzle reel stuff. I mean, we were having those conversations, but it's hard to determine the reality of those, especially when you have guys like Ben Simmons. I feel like we've talked about Ben Simmons like 2 or 3 times in the last 3 podcasts, but I do think it's difficult. But
Ben Simmons sizzle reel has cultural influence. He's like Ben Simmons sizzle reels is like the new LiAngelo Ball song, just taking over.
Oh my God. Anyway, moving on before we tweak out. I think it's just funny because not only does Ben Simmons have great sizzle reels in that one particular gym, but everybody does. But off topic, we are wrapping this episode up. The Cavs play the Oklahoma City Thunder, number 1 team from the West, number 1 team from the East, number 1 offense, number 1 defense. It is going to be a great show, and I think we're all looking forward to it, especially when it comes to how it could play out or be a preview to the NBA Finals, something that we've talked about on this podcast before. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you can send in your questions for the next Hey Chris episode. This week's episode will be later into the week. It'll be a fun little one that we do before heading into the weekend. But if you also want stats, insight, and updates throughout games about what's going on behind the scenes or things that we can see that maybe you just don't, this is where you can get those. So to do that, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.